So kind of transitioning from the last one, in the last project you got to create two different kinds, or you got to at least explore the different kinds of gradients that you can create within your objects. So your objects don't have to be one solid color. You can add as many colors to them as possible. And there's two different kinds of gradients that you can create. You've got your linear gradient, remember if you got your gradient palette open, and you have a radial style of gradient. And the only main thing about those are linear goes from one point to another straight across your object, and the radial goes from a central point outward, but it still fills in your entire object. There is one more kind of gradient, and our book is you're going to create what's called a gradient mesh. That's what this one down here looks like. By mesh, you can think of it kind of as a net, a little mesh net. And with this one, as you can see, you can tell it exactly where to pinpoint specific colors and then have them blend in with each other inside of your object. So you're not just going from one central point, you're actually telling it exactly where those points should be and having them blend together. As with the other meshes, you can add as many points as you want or as few. It all depends on the amount of detail that you want to get into. Let me show you what the project what you're going to be ultimately creating. Let's get the gradient out of the way. For this one, we're also going to be putting things on two different artboards, and you can see the artboards are different sizes. One of the best things about Illustrator versus some of the other software I've worked on is that you can actually make multiple artboards and give them different sizes and be able to save it as different files. In InDesign or in Photoshop, usually you're just working with one page or you're working with one set size. With this one, you can create a letterhead and an envelope all in the same document and be able to customize it from here. And this is what we'll get into a little bit later. I'll talk about that next class. The first thing that we're going to do is to vectorize. They're going to give you a lemon. So I'm going to work through this one simply because there's a lot of steps that go into creating this lemon. And we're going to do it by creating a gradient mesh of the lemon. Illustrator has its own particular style, so it's not going to be 100% photorealistic. Remember, I'm not looking for realism. I'm not looking for high-tech, what am I trying to say, high detail. I'm looking for, are you using the correct technique to be able to vectorize it. When I select the lemon, you can see all the different points that go into it. And you can see it even loses some of the highlights and some of the little texture details. Totally fine. Let's jump back into my demonstration. Let me show you how to create a gradient mesh and some things to think about when you create this kind of thing. I've drawn off just a regular object. Nothing, and it's just a regular solid fill inside of it. There's two different ways you can create them. The book is going to have you start off by going up to Object, once it's selected, choosing Create Gradient Mesh, and this will bring up this little dialog box. I've got preview turned on so you can see it being created as I make the changes. You tell it the number of rows and columns within your object that you want to go. Notice when it creates the rows, it's going to try to follow the contour of it, left to right, top to bottom, the longitude and latitude. You can increase the rows and columns. You can see when I do that, it actually adds more or fewer. And we'll keep this one relatively simple. The thing about when working with these, the more points you have, the better the detail, but it's also very unruly to work with. You've got to think about colors for each and every point that's there. There's also an appearance. To be honest, I've never changed up the appearance. I've always kept it flat, but if for some reason you want it to gradiate from a central point outward or the other way around, from edge point in, you have that ability as well. I've usually always just kept mine flat for simplicity purposes. When you say OK, it'll lock it in. Now my mesh has been created on top of my object. The other way you can create mesh is by using your mesh tool. And if you look in your toolbox, it's right next to your gradient tool. When you have it selected, you can click anywhere inside of your object and it will add a point right there. Notice it's not just a point, it's actually adding a vertical and horizontal, a row and column to wherever you want it to be at. And so you can add as few or as many as you want. Now if I was to deselect it, you don't see the mesh itself. It's still just a solid object. So part of the fun is actually trying to select the individual points and then change up the exact colors. Hey, which selection tool lets me select individual points?
The direct selection
direct selection, the white arrow tool. So we're going to be using this selection tool a lot to actually click on individual points. You can tell that that one's selected because all the other ones are white and that one's actually highlighted. I'm going to use my pre-made swatches to quickly change up these colors. I've got that one selected. Then it's simply a matter of choosing the color that I want. And you can see how it will blend in between the other little sections that are there. Now, of course, if I want it to blend a little more, I may need to move around certain sections or click on an object, or excuse me, a point, a vector point, and be able to change those two sides. You can move these around, you can reposition them. That's part of the fun in creating this kind of artwork. But the main thing is you got to select the points and then change it to whatever color you want to be able to work with. Right now I'm not necessarily making anything specific. And to change this up, when I deselect, that's what that looks like. You can click on inside of here, so if I clicked instead of on a point but an actual square, all 4 points get selected, and then I can change that square into an individual part. You can see then it starts to blend it all together from there. Pretty cool? Also, to let you know, this isn't in the book, but there's a lasso selection tool. With this one, it lets you click and drag around, and it will select everything that was inside of that selected area. So if I wanted all of those to be the same color, I could quickly select those and get all that to be placed in there. So what can we do with this? Not too much if I'm just playing around with this. Here's how we're going to do it for the logo that's created. It's going to ask you to import the lemon, put it on a layer, and then we're going to draw on top of this layer. I'm going to kind of go a little bit quicker than what the book does, but the book is going to ask you first to draw off your lemon. I'm going to use my line tool, pen tool. Remember with the pen tool, you start off with a single point and then move along. What do I hold down to give myself that curve ability?
Shift?
Not shift. I want to take a second guess.
You just click and hold it.
You can click and drag. That's what I'm doing right now. That'll give me my Bezier. If you click and then hold down your Option key. The Option key is what gives you that ability to click on a straight line and then redo it. Remember, if you make a mistake, you can always go back. For instance, right here, I want to clean up that line. Use your direct selection tool to either click on the Bezier curve or the line itself and reposition it. You can see I did that really quickly. I'm not looking for perfection, I'm just looking for the right technique to be used. Before I add the gradient mesh, let me show you one more tool that's going to be very helpful in using this. It's called your eyedropper tool. It's below your little gradient mesh tool. It looks like a little syringe glass eyedropper that you would use. With this, wherever I click on my document, it'll pick up that particular color. Watch the fill color swatch change as I click throughout the lemon. I've gotten one click, picks up that particular shade. If I clicked over here in a lighter area, I can pick up the lighter tones. So the lemon itself isn't just one solid yellow color. I want to be able to get these darker shadows, and I want to be able to get the highlights as it moves into a lighter edge. And I want to be able to line it up to the mesh that I'll be creating. So I'll be swapping back and forth from my eyedropper to my selection tool to do that. Let's add gradient mesh. Got it selected. We'll go to Object, create a gradient mesh. And, oh, let's see. Forgot which one the book does. No, I don't want it from the center. Let's do a flat one. I'm going to do one more thing. Let's fill it in with some yellow before I move on. Now we're styling. Object, gradient mesh. Let's do a 4x4. Remember, if you need to add more lines, you can always go back to it, use your mesh tool, and that'll give you the ability to change those up as well. Okay, I've got an issue, however. Once it's filled in, I can't see my picture that's below it. Now remember, we do have a preview mode, not a preview, but an outline mode. If you go to View and Outline, it'll look like this, so I can actually see my gradient, but what have I lost in doing that? Lost my lemon, lost my picture. What I would really like to do is to be able to see the outline of my vector and the not outline, the preview of my picture. Here's how we're going to do that. Go back to preview mode. If you hold down your Command key, this is the key that's next to your keyboard, and click on the eyeball in your Layers panel, it'll swap. Notice that the eyeball now is not filled in. It's still there. You haven't turned it off. But it swaps just that layer into preview mode. Now I can see both my lines and my lemon that's on the layer that's below it. Let's continue on. Here's the fun part. Got my selection tool, so I can select individual points. I can get my eyedropper tool, so I can select individual colors. I'm going to quickly swap between these two tools by using a keyboard shortcut. I've still got my eyedropper tool. The Command key, once again, is going to come in handy. Watch my tool change as I hold down my Command key. Eyedropper, selection tool. When I let go, back to an eyedropper, to the selection tool. So I don't have to keep going back to my toolbox, but I can select a point, got it here, let go of my Command key, and then I can click on a color that's next to it, say right about here. You can see it changes over here. Go back to my selection tool, Command key, select, pick up a color. Command select, let go, pick up a color. It's going to be subtle at first, and since I'm working in preview mode, you can't really see it happening. But eventually, I can select all of my points, and since I'm picking up the color that's closest to this point, it'll colorize it in. Let's do this row and we'll look at it and see what it looks like. Select it, Command, let go, and click on it. Let's turn this back into preview mode. What did I have to hold down to turn it into outline mode? Command. So let's hold down Command, click again, and this is what I'm left with. You see it building up? Pretty cool. Any point that you have on here, any vector point that's inside of your object can be recolored. And so your job is to go through each of the vector points, select them, and fill them in to be able to create it. Let's do all this. Doesn't even have to be part of the gradient mesh. It can be any of the ones that you have. If you miss a point, you can see right here I've obviously missed a little vector point. Simply go back in, reselect it, and then re-click on it. Uh-oh, still missing a point. Where is that point? Where are you? Maybe it was this one? Oh well, I'm going to have to go back eventually and re-get it. I think there's 2 points hiding closely there. Let's zoom in and see if I can see it. Zoom. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just a glitch. There we go. Go back to preview. Now it's all good. What your job will be to do is to do the entire lemon all the way through. And yours will pick up the highlights, pick up all the shadows for each of the edges that it's done. When it's done, it should look something very, very close to this. All cool? Any questions on this? Again, follow along in the book. The book is going to tell you exactly how to set yours up. If your gradient mesh doesn't look like the book's, that's okay. Everyone is going to be slightly different when working through this. It simply depends on how you set up your outline and your tracing that you did. Final thing. A lot of people are going to finish outlining and doing the lemon by the end of class. And if you do, go on to stage 2 where it talks about adding type to your stationery. The second part of this is you're going to be making a logo for the Cafe Lemon. You're going to take an existing font and we're going to be able to change it up and to make it into its own letter forms that we want. Here's how that's going to go down. There's a couple of things to know about working with type and the type tool in Illustrator. The tool we're going to use looks like a T, is your type tool. And with it, when you select it, pay attention to the options that you have in your control panel at the very top. Things like changing your font, changing the size, even your paragraph alignment. All of this comes into play. If I was to click once, I get a little blinking cursor icon. It may or may not show up on yours very well. I can type in whatever I want. If I need to highlight or change the text, I'm still using my type tool. And I can go up here and here's the fonts that I'm working with. If you click down, you get a little preview of what the fonts look like, and of course you get the name of it on here. all of the computers should have the fonts that we're using installed on it. Now, if you're working on your personal computer, you're going to have to install these Adobe fonts. Let me know and I'll show you how to do it. It's pretty simple on the Macintosh system. But you can choose the font that we're using. I think we're using ATC Garamond. Oh, let me show you that real quick. I just started typing ATC Garamond and it automatically finds it and updates it from here. With it selected, change my font. Another thing it's going to tell you is to click on the character hot panel, I think it's called. By that, there's an actual panel associated with both the character and the paragraph. And if you click on the word character, it opens up that panel and you get the full range of things you can do with it. Not only can you change the size, but you can change the tracking and kerning, you can change the dimensions of it, make things all caps or lowercase, lots of little different stuff that you can do with it. Here's the final thing I'll show you. I still have my pen tool selected, and I can keep typing if necessary, deleting. But how to deselect the type that I've created? As with the other one, if you hold down your command key, watch it change to my selection tool. With my selection tool, I can see my bounding box. I can even change the size of it with my bounding box. I can also click off and deselect my type. This will allow me to click anywhere else and then continue typing from there. Pretty cool? So the command key comes in handy when working and creating. The final thing it's going to get you to do, once you type it off, we're going to expand and create outlines for these particular letters, and it'll allow you to, in this case, elongate the L, move the F around, create the little outline, move some type closer together. I'm going to reselect my letters here. Let's zoom in. We talked about this on one of our first classes. Fonts are a form of vector drawing. When you type out something in Illustrator, it treats each of the characters as editable text. So I can always go back in and add characters and delete characters, those kind of things. What I would like to see is the actual vector lines that make up each of my characters. Here's how to do that. With it selected, if you go to Type, one of the options is to create outlines. Check out my type once I create outlines. Let's reselect it again. Oh, it's not even showing my points. Let's turn my points on. I'll just turn on my vector grids. Come on, come on. There we go. I'll select my points. Now, even when I zoom in, you can see the individual vector points that makes up with this. Once it's outlined, and I've got those vector points, it's simply a matter of clicking on the letter that I want, and I'll be able to adjust it, change it around, even get rid of whole things if I wanted to. This is one way I, as a graphic designer, can take a logo from take a font from an existing character set and make a customized logo from it. You can move around individual letters, change them up, add to them. Of course, all I'm doing is just extending things out. The downside is, once you've created outlines of an existing font, it's no longer seen in Illustrator as a set of type. It's actual individual objects. So I can't take my type tool, try to re-click in here and type again. It's just going to create a whole new line of type. Does that make sense? Okay. They are all grouped together, so if I wanted to click around, they'll all be grouped as one. You can ungroup them. Go to Object and Ungroup. There it is. Then this will let me click on individual letters, rechange, reposition, recolor if necessary, whatever I need from here. Okay, that's what you're going to get into from this. The first thing it's going to get you to do is to type out cafe and lemon. Then we're going to be changing some of the things around, and it's going to get you to redraw the little leaf at the top of the I on lemon. All right, I'm going to turn your computer back over to y'all, let you get started on this.